Supreme Elhain is coming to Raid Shadow Legends with Supreme Galek, Athel, and Kael. I don't know how soon, but around the corner as well. Lots to unpack here. A Void Legendary. Pretty big, so you know what? Let's just get right into it. What up team, it is MurderInc. We are talking about the release of the new fragment summoning champion coming up, going to be Supreme Elhain. I've been calling her Helen for so long, so if you hear me say Supreme Helen, just know I'm talking about Elhain. Murder, why Helen? Why not? I don't know. I don't know why I started saying Helen, kind of just came out and stuck one day. So first let's talk about this champion. Who is this champion going to be good for? Early game players, mid game, late game, end game, and then as my clan leader Infinite said, there's dead game. That's where my account is and where a few hundred players' accounts are currently at the dead game stage where there's just nothing to do. It's kind of a dead game. So unfortunately, if you're in the dead game category, regardless of this champion's skills, even if it was the craziest thing ever, it's not going to be good for you. It's going to be like just a terrible champion. So let's go over the kit. You guys probably already saw and heard about it, but skim through it really quickly. It attacks one enemy 2 times, transferring a random debuff from Supreme Elhain to the target. A2 4-turn cooldown, unbooked down to a 3-turn, not terrible. An AoE ability, damage increases by 10% for each debuff on the target, resets the cooldown of Crack Shot if this attack kills an enemy. So an AoE with the potential of resetting a cooldown of the A3, and let's get into that Crack Shot. 6-turn cooldown, booked down to a 4, a single target ability. Hopefully it hits hard, we'll see. Ignores ally protect, strengthen, shield buff, and grants an extra turn if this kills an enemy. Passive cannot inflict decreased attack, inflicts 20% more damage against targets whose attack is lower than this champion. So I would probably say the multipliers won't be crazy because there is something conditional here. And if you've been playing for a long period of time, you know that conditional champions rarely have high multipliers. They kind of lean on the passives and everything else that kind of boost their damage to that next level. So I would assume, I don't know this for sure, but I would assume that the multipliers aren't going to be crazy, but they're really going to be putting a lot of emphasis on the implaceable passive here, increasing 20% more damage against targets whose attack is lower, and most champions' attack should be lower if you're building Supreme Elhain well. Next, we have an aura, increases attack by 30% in all battles, can be nice for sure. So who is this champion going to be good for? Let's go over that first. Early game, home run. Mid game, amazing, home run. Late game, 50-50. Doesn't matter if your multipliers are crazy. Stoneskin gear is way too common. Now if you see a clear Stoneskin opponent, you should be able to kind of notice what a Stoneskin opponent looks like. If not, leave a comment. Maybe I'll make a video on how to tell if an opponent's wearing Stoneskin. You can tell by the 4 champions they're using in the arena. So if no Stoneskin and you see a Necrit, hey, this champion, Supreme Elhain, is probably going to take out that Necrit. This is a pretty good counter to the Necrit passive specifically. The shield buff thing, I think it's okay. Yes, stacking shields are nice. Bolster set has been in quite a few rotations on the Forge Pass, and quite funny enough, there's currently a Bolster Forge Pass now. Is it going to make Bolster irrelevant? No. It's a single target ability, and the A2 does not ignore shields as well, so even if you're able to kill one enemy who is under a Bolster set effect by ignoring the shield, you're going to AoE into 3 other champions with probably a massive shield on them. It just is what it is. So it's a nice idea for taking out one really crucial target protected by a massive shield, but will it be enough? And I guess that is the question that remains to be seen. There are masteries you can take that do increased damage to shielding champions, so I wouldn't say that part's unique. The fact that it ignores strength and ally protection, however, is very strong. Strengthen is probably the greatest defensive buff, not including Stoneskin, of course, that you can actually have on a champion because of the straight flat DR it gives. It's not like increased defense or anything like that. Ally protection is strong for sure, but if you beat up on a champion for long enough, the other champion is going to take a lot of heat that casted the ally protection, so they're probably going to fall over like a stack of cards. So with that being said, the one major issue I do see with Supreme Elhain is what champion counters single target abilities. Yes, my friends, that is going to be Ultimate Death Knight. So unfortunately, Ultimate Death Knight is probably never going to be under a Necrit passive. If they are, your opponent's probably new to the game or they're trolling, and you can just simply slot in a Necrit with an Ultimate Death Knight and it completely counters this passive here, right? So completely counters it. It is what it is. Now, one major thing I did see is going to be the A1. There is some issues with Polymorph being very prominent in an arena setting, and I know I'm only talking about arena. I'll cover pretty much all PvE in a second here, but the main focus is going to be arena for sure, based on kind of how they laid this champion out here. Each hit transfers a random debuff from this champion to the target here. So listen, the thing with Sheep is, while it is annoying and a nuisance, it's very easy to get around. You, unless you bring the wrong champion, of course, control who gets sheeped and who doesn't get sheeped. It's completely up to the player based on the skills that are used. Unless you're on a full auto team and don't care, then you probably don't mind anyways if you do get sheeped. So I do understand the sheep meta per se is going to be annoying. However, if you ask any top player, they're going to say there is no sheep meta because, like I just said, you kind of control whether you get sheeped or not sheeped because there's a clear way to proc sheep. I think we all understand that. You can just go to the blessing page. I think I have it up in the background here. Yeah, so if you're not placing a debuff, removing or stealing from them, you won't get sheeped. So if you have a champion that does any of those things, just don't use the skill, right? And if you're going to use the skill, use it on a skill that's going to kill the target. Now, like I said, you're not always in that opportunity to do that. If you use someone like a Kaimar, why'd you bring a Kaimar, right? It is what it is there. So while sheep is an issue, I don't think it's going to be that much of an issue for a champion like Supreme Elhain, because if you're prioritizing using the A1 ability, I don't know. And I do understand there's the point of, what about the A2 murder? How are you just going to skip over that? Damage increases by 10% for each debuff from the target. Listen, this goes to my earlier point here. If the goal of your team is to build everything around Supreme Elhain, you really don't care if the champion that's putting the debuffs on the enemy team gets sheeped, because Supreme Elhain is all that matters. So the debuffs go out, your debuffer gets sheeped, Supreme Elhain cleans house with the AoE. It is what it is. Now, if you don't clean house and you kind of get caught up there, then I can see the downside to this for sure. But debuffers have one purpose. It is to debuff the enemies. Countering that is not sheep. Countering that is a cleanse ability. So that's kind of where I'll stay with sheep. If you want to know more about sheep, leave a comment. I can make a video on that, on how to counter sheep perfectly, because it, like I said, it's up to the player. And as you know, if you go to the arena, you can see beforehand who has sheep on their team. Like right here, we have a Russian opponent, I believe, that has 2 sheep champions, so it's not like I'm going in blind. So if you're bringing a debuffer into this without Supreme Elhain, or kind of the thought process that I explained to you, where sheep doesn't matter against debuffers, if you get the debuffs out and then the next champion is the real useful one. So with that being said, I've never understood the annoyance with sheep personally, because it's such an easily avoided thing unless you aren't aware of the mechanics currently in place in the game. So outside of PvP, what do we got here? We have a void damage dealer, so really cool. I guess it's going to come down to how easy is this champion going to be to get. I'm assuming not easy. Like I said, we have Supreme Elhain, Galek, Athel, and Kael. Hopefully that's not new information. If it is, I'm sorry, I didn't know. But we should be expecting those champions, and I'm just saying, if Galek isn't the greatest champion in Raid, we're going to have beef. I'm going to tell you right now, we are going to have beef, because Galek is the poster child of this game. I don't care about Death Knight, he's whatever, irrelevant. Elhain, Kael, Athel, they're all irrelevant. Galek, he's the homie, we all know it, so he better have ignores all passives and 1000% defense just to kind of be the alpha male that we all know he is. So with that being said, outside of player versus player. Is she going to be good? Possibly. Why do I say possibly? Because we can get this A2 to a 2-turn cooldown. Murder, how do we do that? Simple, don't use the A3 first. Use the A2, get the wave of enemies low. The next turn you get an A3, get that extra turn, A1, bam. We already cut down the cooldown by 1 from a 3-turn to a 2-turn cooldown because of that extra turn. So she can be pumping out pretty significant damage. Now again, it's going to be dependent on the multipliers. The passive is going to be much harder to pull off in PvE content because the base attack is rather high on these champions. If you know this, they use the base speeds for pretty much all PvE, unlike wave type champions. However, attack, defense, HP, those are the things that scale. They don't scale crit damage, crit rate, none of that stuff. So that's where you might run into a problem as to getting a full effect of the passive. But Arena, like I said, home run, you'll be fine. One thing that I do kind of want to talk about, and it's worth mentioning, as much as I hate to do this, there is a champion we have to talk about, right? And there's a meme about this kind of floating around here, but let's just talk about him now. Let's go to Sacred Orders. Just kidding. He is a Sacred Order. So we have Astralon here. He is Supreme Elhain, but he isn't. He is and he isn't, right? First of all, Astralon has a duo. And the duo, as we all know, is going to be Countess Lix. Now, Countess Lix was available, I believe, in a guaranteed event, and Astralon was a fusion. So this duo, on paper, everywhere you can consider, is going to be better than Supreme Elhain, because Astralon is still very, very strong. Where he suffers is going to be 2 sheep, because while debuffing an enemy to increase Supreme Elhain's damage is fine if that champion gets sheeped, this is where it gets into an issue. Light of Sanctity, we have an AoE stun, we have a buff removal. This is like a sheep magnet here. So with that being said, probably not the best thing, but there's also a lot of value in this A2 ability. Ignores increased defense, strengthen and ally protection, and instead of ignoring a shield, he actually has other beneficial shield interactions. So if you have Astralon, you have a decent idea as to how Supreme Elhain is going to work here, and let's just say Astralon's model is really, really impressive. So we'll see. We only have this kind of artwork as of right now. Maybe Supreme Elhain does kind of impress visually as well, but Astralon is going to be hard to beat. But he's an easy comparison. If you would say, I don't have Astralon, I could use an Astralon. As long as you're not looking at an AoE stun here, you'll probably find a use for Supreme Elhain. So give me your feedback on this champions. It's hard to go wrong with a Void Legendary champion. They're far and few between, very rare to get. I don't have to preach this to you guys. Everyone is quite aware of how hard it is to get a Void Legendary, so this might be something worth going after depending on where your account is. I gave the breakdown. I said where I thought early, mid, late, end, and then dead game players kind of should be focusing if they do want Supreme Elhain. So that's going to be up to you guys. Let me know if you're going to go after her. If you're going to wait for some testing, I don't think we're going to be able to test this champion prior to the release. So we kind of just have to wait until she comes out, and you're going to have to see what the fragment events look like. If it's within your grasp, then for sure go for it. If not, maybe you're going to think twice if you do have to spend any type of real money to get this champion. So that's going to conclude this video, giving your thoughts on this champion. I think she's pretty good overall. Doesn't necessarily turn heads because, like I said, Astralon already exists in the game. It doesn't see a lot of play, served for the purposes we're looking at here. So give me your thoughts and feedback on all of that. If you enjoyed this content, smash the like button, subscribe, helps out the channel a ton, and I will see you all in the next upload.